The last 8 months, I thought maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was the one who couldn't let go, couldn't adapt, couldn't accept that my son had his own life now. I kept telling myself that. Every morning, sitting in that folding chair next to the water heater, I told myself it was temporary. They had no idea I had already called my attorney. My name is Vincent. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer. Bridges, overpasses, the kind of infrastructure you drive over every day without thinking about it. I built things meant to last. I believed in foundations. I believed if you put something together right, it holds. I never applied that logic to my family. Maybe I should have. My wife, Patricia, not the one from church, passed away 4 years ago from pancreatic cancer. 14 weeks from diagnosis to gone. We didn't even have time to be afraid properly. One day she was complaining her back hurt, and then she was just not there anymore. 40 years of marriage. 40 years of her leaving coffee on my side of the counter every single morning, and then nothing. After she died, my son, I'll just call him my son, because names don't matter as much as what he did. He suggested I sell the house in Naperville and come live with him in Columbus. His place was big, he said. 4 bedrooms. Just him and his wife at the time. Plenty of room. I didn't want to go. I want to be clear about that. I had my life in Naperville. My neighbor Walt had been my Thursday poker buddy for 20 years. My doctor was there. My barber. The cemetery where Patricia was buried was 8 minutes from my front door. I had roots, but my son was persuasive. He said he didn't want me alone. He said it would be good for both of us. He said his wife, I'll call her Christine, was excited about it. She loves you, Dad, he told me. She wants you there. So I sold the house. I sold it for $340,000, a fair price for Naperville in 2022. I put most of it in a joint account with my son because he said it would be easier for expenses for the household. I kept some back in my own savings. Not enough. I didn't keep enough back. That was my first mistake, and I knew it even then, but I trusted him. He was my son. I moved into the second-floor guest room in October. It had a window that looked out over the backyard, a nice enough closet, and a bathroom I shared with nobody because the other upstairs rooms were storage. It wasn't my house, but it was comfortable. For about 4 months, it was fine. Then Christine got pregnant. I want to say I was happy, and part of me was, genuinely, a grandchild, something to look forward to. I bought a little wooden rocking horse at an antique store on my 3rd week there. Set it in the corner of my room to give them eventually. I was really trying to be good at this new chapter. But Christine started changing around month 2, little things at first. The thermostat. She kept it at 68 and I run cold, always have. Patricia always complained about it, so I'd nudge it up to 70 when I came downstairs in the morning. One day, Christine left a sticky note on the thermostat, please don't adjust. K. No conversation, just a note. Then it was the kitchen. I'd been cooking Sunday breakfast since I moved in. Eggs, bacon, toast, the whole thing. Something I used to do with Patricia every week. Christine told my son she found it disruptive. He relayed the message to me like he was apologizing for bad weather. She just likes the kitchen a certain way in the morning, Dad. I stopped making breakfast. Then she started talking about the nursery. The nursery was going to be in one of the storage rooms down the hall, she said. That was fine. That made sense. But then she started mentioning, casually, always casually, that it would be so much more convenient if the nursery were closer to their bedroom. Their bedroom was at the end of the hall. The storage rooms were in the middle. My room was right next to theirs. I heard it the first time she said it. I just didn't believe she meant it. 3 weeks later, she meant it. It was a Thursday night. I'd made myself a sandwich and was eating at the kitchen island because the dining table felt formal when it was just me. My son came in from the garage and sat down across from me, and I could tell from the way he was holding his shoulders that this was a planned conversation. Dad, he said, Christine and I have been talking. I put down my sandwich. He told me they decided the guest room, my room, the room I'd lived in for 8 months, would work better as the nursery. It was the right size, the right location. They wanted me to move downstairs. Downstairs was the basement. Now, I want you to understand something about this basement. It wasn't finished. There was carpet down there, technically, and my son had a couch and a TV and called it a media room, but it had one egress window the size of a legal pad, exposed pipes along the ceiling, and a bathroom that was a toilet and a shower stall with no door. There was no closet. The water heater was in the corner behind a folding screen. I sat there looking at my son and I said, "There are 3 other rooms upstairs." "They're full of stuff," he said. "Then move the stuff." He looked at his hands. "Christine really wants the room closest to ours for nighttime feedings. She has anxiety about." "Move me to one of the other rooms," I said. "I don't need the big room. Dad, it's just temporary. Once we're in a routine with the baby, we'll figure something out." I should have said no. I should have stood up from that island stool and said, "Absolutely not. I'm a 66-year-old man and I moved here at your invitation and I am not living in your unfinished basement." I know that now. I knew it then, honestly. But there's something that happens when your child asks you something, even when the child is 41 years old and the something is completely unreasonable. Some reflex that says, "Don't make this harder than it has to be. Don't be the difficult one. Don't make him choose." I moved to the basement. I want to be clear, I moved myself. I didn't ask for help. I carried my own boxes down those stairs because I wasn't going to give either of them the satisfaction of watching me struggle with it. I set up my clothes on a rolling rack I bought from Target. I put my books on a folding table. I plugged in the lamp Patricia and I bought in Sedona 12 years ago on a road trip, the one with the turquoise base, and I sat down on the couch next to the water heater and I thought, "Vincent, what have you done?" For 2 months, I told myself it was temporary. The baby was due in April. I told myself that by June, I'd be back in a real room. I was patient. I am by nature a patient man. You have to be. In engineering, watching a bridge go up, one beam at a time. But Christine was watching me too. And she was patient in a different way. She started going to my son's phone when she thought I wasn't paying attention. I noticed because she'd pick it up from the counter, glance at it, set it down. Not the way you check a notification, but the way you verify something. Once I walked into the kitchen and she closed a browser tab on the shared computer fast enough that I caught the motion but not the content. Then there was the account. My son managed most of the household finances because he'd set up the accounts and I'd never been much for online banking. Patricia had always handled that, but I had the login. I checked it one February morning and saw a transfer I didn't recognize. $18,000 to an account I didn't know in December. I almost called my son right then. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and wrote down the account number on a notepad I kept by the water heater. I didn't say anything. I just started paying closer attention. Christine had a habit of making phone calls in the car in the driveway. I don't think she realized I could hear her from the basement window, that small egress window. When she pulled in and sat there talking before coming inside, most of what I caught was fragments. But in March, I heard enough. She was talking to someone, a friend, maybe, or a sister. I couldn't tell. And she was talking about the house, about what it was worth, about when it's in both our names, about how my son was still soft about it, but she was working on him. I stood in my basement with a sandwich in my hand and I listened to my daughter-in-law describe my son's inheritance, the money from the sale of my house, my retirement account contributions, the equity I'd helped build by moving in and splitting costs. Like it was a project she was managing, a timeline she was following. I went upstairs that night and told my son I wanted to look at some of the financial statements together. Just to understand what was going on, I said. I kept my voice even. He got defensive immediately, said I didn't trust him, said Christine was stressed enough with the pregnancy, said this wasn't the time. That was when I knew I wasn't going to handle this by talking. I called my attorney the next morning. Howard Griggs, who I'd used for our estate planning years ago and who I trusted absolutely. I told him everything, the account transfer, what I'd heard in the driveway, the joint account structure. He was quiet for a long moment, and then he said, "Vincent, I need you to do exactly what I tell you and not discuss any of this with your son until we're ready." I said I understood. Howard told me to open my own separate checking account at a different bank immediately. He told me to get my own copy of every financial document I could access. He told me to write down dates and details of every conversation I found concerning and email them to him, so they'd be time-stamped, and he told me to be very careful. I followed every instruction. I also bought a small digital recorder from Best Buy. I want to say up front, I checked Ohio law. Ohio was a one-party consent state, which means I was allowed to record conversations I was part of. I wasn't going to eavesdrop. I was going to document what was said to me directly. April came. The baby was born. A healthy boy, and I want to be clear that I love that child and none of this is about him. I held him in the hospital, and he was perfect, and that part is separate from everything else. But the week after they came home from the hospital, Christine told my son she wasn't comfortable with me living in the house anymore. Not just the basement, the house. She said she needed her space, she was postpartum, she couldn't have the stress. My son came down to the basement the following Saturday morning. He didn't sit down. He said, "Dad, I think you need to find your own place." I looked at him. He was staring at the carpet. "This is my house too," I said. "My money is in this house." "We'll work that out," he said. "Howard can help with the paperwork." He didn't know I already had Howard. "I need a timeline," I said. "End of next month," I said. "End of next month," he said. I kept my voice steady. I said, "I just want to make sure I understand what you're asking me to do." And he said it clearly, looking right at me this time. And I had the recorder in the pocket of my flannel shirt. "Dad, I need you to move out. Christine and I have built a life here, and we need to do this on our own." I nodded. I said I'd think about it. I called Howard that afternoon. What happened over the next 6 weeks was not dramatic in the way you might expect. There were no shouting matches, there were no thrown dishes. There was just Howard, and documents, and the law operating the way the law does when you've lived long enough to know how to use it. Howard had already flagged the $18,000 transfer as unauthorized. I had never signed off on it, and the joint account agreement required my signature for transfers over $5,000. There had been 2 other transfers I'd missed, smaller ones, totaling another $9,200. Howard sent a formal letter to my son's address requiring accounting of all funds. My son called me that night, voice strange, and asked if I'd hired a lawyer. "You said Howard could help with the paperwork," I said. So I called Howard. There was a long silence. "Dad, I'd like you to talk to your wife," I said, "about the phone calls she makes in the driveway." Another silence. Longer. I had already found an apartment, a 2-bedroom in a complex near Hilliard, Ohio, quiet and well-maintained, 12 minutes from a good fishing lake I'd found online. I'd paid my deposit from my separate account. I'd already arranged for movers. I didn't tell him any of that yet. The conversation that followed, and I don't need to give you every word, is when my son understood what his wife had been doing. Howard was able to show a documented pattern. The transfers, the title inquiries Christine had made on the property, the conversation I had on the recorder. He wasn't a villain. He was a man who'd let himself be managed by someone who was better at it than he was, and who had been too proud and too in love to see it. He called me the next day and cried on the phone. I won't make fun of that. He's my son. But I had also spent 6 months sleeping next to a water heater in a basement, watching my retirement savings disappear $9,000 at a time, eating sandwiches alone at a kitchen island in what used to be my own arrangement. Tears on the phone didn't undo that. The financial settlement was handled through attorneys. I won't give you numbers because that's not the point. But I will tell you, I got back everything that was taken and I got assigned accounting of every dollar in that joint account. Christine did not get what she was working toward. The house did not go into both their names on her timeline. I moved into my apartment on a Thursday in June. I drove my own car. I had 2 guys from the moving company carry the furniture. I plugged in the lamp from Sedona, the one with a turquoise base, and put it by the window that looks out over the parking lot in a row of oak trees. It's not the house in Naperville. It's not what I had with Patricia, but it's mine in the way that matters. Nobody can take it from me. Nobody can relocate me to the basement of it. Nobody can make phone calls in the driveway about what it's worth. My son and I still talk. It's different. I don't know yet what it becomes. He's raising his boy and dealing with the aftermath of understanding that the person he chose was working against his father while he wasn't paying attention. That's a hard thing to carry. I don't envy him that weight. But I'll tell you what I know. From 67 years and a career spent making sure things are built right, the moment you let someone make you feel like a burden in a house you helped pay for, you stopped being a guest and started becoming a target. I waited too long to understand that. I kept giving the benefit of the doubt to people who had stopped deserving it. I found a Thursday poker game in Hilliard. Different faces, same game. Last week, I won $43 and drove home through streets I'm still learning. Past a lake that was gold in the evening light, and I thought about Patricia, the way I do every day, and I thought she would have known from the beginning. She always read people better than me. I'm learning. 67 is not too late to learn. I've thought a lot about what I would have done differently. Not to punish myself, I'm past that, but because there's something useful in looking back clearly without the fog of wanting things to have been easier than they were. The honest answer is that I waited too long. Not because I was weak, but because I kept choosing kindness over clarity, and I confused those two things for years. I thought being patient with my son was the same as being wise. It isn't. Patience without boundaries isn't a virtue, it's an invitation. What Christine did didn't happen overnight. It built slowly, the way damage to a foundation builds, invisible, until the crack finally runs all the way up the wall. The thermostat note. The Sunday breakfasts. The basement. Each one was small enough to explain away. Each one trained me to accept a little less than I deserved. That's how it works. That's always how it works. Not with one big demand, but with 100 small ones that you absorb until absorbing is just what you do. I don't carry bitterness about it. Bitterness is for people who never figure it out, and I figured it out. What I carry instead is a very clear understanding of cause and effect, the kind of understanding I should have applied to my own family the same way I applied it to bridges and load tolerances for 31 years. Every action has a consequence. Every time I said nothing, that was an action. Every time I moved my things down one more step, from the guest room to the basement, from the basement to the edge of being told to leave, I was participating in my own displacement. I'm not blaming myself for being deceived. I am being honest that I had information earlier than I acted on it, and I chose comfort over confrontation. The thing about integrity is that it doesn't negotiate. Either you hold a line or you don't. The moment I called Howard, I was done negotiating. Not angry, not theatrical, just done. And it turned out that a man who is simply quietly done is harder to manage than anyone expected. My son was not a bad person. He was a person who stopped paying attention, and that is its own kind of moral failure. Intelligence without attention is just wasted capacity. He was smart enough to know something was wrong and chose not to look directly at it because looking was uncomfortable. We all do that sometimes. The question is whether you do it long enough to cause real damage to someone who trusted you. He caused real damage. He knows that now. What he does with that knowledge is his work to do, not mine. What I know is this: the lamp from Sedona is by my window. The poker game on Thursdays is a good one, and when I drive past that lake in the evening light, I feel something I hadn't felt in nearly a year in that basement. I feel like myself. Steady. Clear. Mine. That's what nobody can take from you when you finally stop letting them.